Hello and welcome to Mappy Hour. I'm Lisa Berry and I'm excited for you to join myself and other Esri cartographers as we take a deep dive into the art, history, and impact of map making. To kick things off, we're tossing it over to Edie, Ken, and Nathan, who are going to take us on a journey through time to explore some classic maps from history.
Hi, welcome to Mappy Hour for 2026. I'm Edie Punt, super happy to be back. I'm here with Ken Field,
Hello.
Nathan Shephard,
Hello.
and we are really excited to be back again going through this year a couple of the maps that we have been inspired by over the centuries. All right, Ken, do you want to get us started off?
Let's go. So I'm going to start with a very, very famous map. A lot of people might recognize this. The John Snow map of cholera from the outbreak, the epidemic in London, Soho in 1854. Now, as we all know, he made this map. He found out that cholera was killing all these people. People came along, they ripped the pump handle off, cholera was solved, and everyone went home happy because he'd invented GIS with this first thematic map, right?
The map that saved the world.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Oh.
So it's a great story, but actually there's a few myths surrounding this map. It's true, it is a great map. It's really just points on a map, and it works really well because each of those little black marks shows one person in a household that's died from cholera. The data was gathered through survey means, but the map was never actually used as an analytical tool to figure out what the problem was and to solve it.
It came after
The fact.
Okay.
But there's more.
More.
Or,
That's right. Snow didn't make it.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was a guy called Charles Cheffins, an engraver and a publisher who actually made the map. Much like a lot of maps at the time, the people they're attributed to didn't make it. It was somebody else, somebody in the back office, somebody doing the engraving, somebody doing the work. It also wasn't the first map. Valentine Seaman did this in the late 1700s on a map of yellow fever in New York City. And there was even another cholera map in 1854 made by Edmund Cooper in London in the same year. We surely not plagiarized.
Surely not.
Well, we'll never know. But it's a great map. I love it. And that's my first map.
Yeah.
what have you got, Nathan?
I was just going to say before we leave this one, like even though it wasn't used for the analysis, it shows that analysis could be done, that mapping things help solve problems.
Sure.
So I think it's very inspiring, even with all of that other stuff. That's cool. Yeah, I'm going to move on to the next one. This is Napoleon's March by Charles Minard. The map was done in 1869 and the event was 1812, 1813. Napoleon thinks it's a good idea to take 400,000 odd men into Russia. What could go wrong in winter? And he had a bad time, came back with just 10,000 men. And this map is kind of like an anti-war theme to it, in that you can just see how many men went in. The width of the line as it goes in, moving towards the right. 400,000 happy Frenchmen go in. Not too many of them get to Moscow, but some get there. They hang out there for about a month or so, realize they have to retreat. It gets pretty cold. And down the bottom, we also see this extra information with the temperature. Temperature's brutal, angry Cossacks chasing them. They had to cross rivers, bad times, and just a small trickle of Frenchmen make it back out the other side. Yeah, what do you guys think of this one?
I just love the fact that even though it looks at like a statistical chart at first glance, I mean, it really is a map. Like there's geography there. You know, you see the rivers crossings and how the width of that line changes at the river crossings. The cities are marked. It's a really cool way to represent this data.
It's interesting though, because if you remake this map using modern day tools, let's say, and you create proportional line widths, you find out that the Minard map is wrong. So the line widths are not proportional to one another. And in fact, what he did was exaggerate the black lines of the returning troops, particularly where they crossed the Berezina River. Because if you made them proportional, there were so few troops returning that the line would be very much thinner.
Wow.
So he exaggerated the line width. I mean, it's still impactful.
But it's even worse than this. It's a big statement, very famous. And what is less famous is this is just one of a pair. He actually did another one for Hannibal. Hannibal went through the Alps with some elephants and some friends, and then this was considered a giant success. But if you look at the width of these lines, you can see that even with this sort of successful campaign, just how much men are lost along the way. And these two maps appeared together on the same sheet. The lower one is the more famous one. The story is much more impactful and much more recent, but the technique is the same.
I've got something that I think is a little less recognizable. This is the historical hieroglyphic chart, the Aztec tribes, and it was included in the Picturesque and Historical Atlas of the United Mexican States, and that was made by Antonio Garcia Cubas in 1885. Now, this is a really important atlas. This was the first atlas of Mexico made by a Mexican, and there were only 300 copies ever made.
Oh.
And it shows the pilgrimage of the Aztecs from their ancestral home in Aztlan, which is shown in the blue square up in the corner. If we follow the path on the map, you follow that brown line, it's got little footsteps, so you know which way to go. And each time we pass by one of those plants, that's not actually a crop or a forest or anything like that. That's showing the passage of one Aztec cycle of time. Similarly, the green dots show how long they spent at a certain location. This is a really unique example of the indigenous tradition of pictorial geographic storytelling.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. There's a giant cricket.
Yeah,
Everybody loves a
cricket's
giant
great.
cricket. Something for everybody in here. I didn't know about the pathway, the steps, the 52 years. It's a form of scale built into the actual path itself.
Yeah, pictorial symbols. Who knew that they worked on maps?
Yeah,
Great.
fantastic.
All right,
Oh,
you're up, Ken.
Well, so I covered a little bit of poo in the water with the cholera map from earlier, so I thought I'd continue the theme of poo
Excellent.
and look at this very, very famous map again, 100 Acre Wood, the Winnie the Pooh map drawn by E.H. Shephard, no relation?
No, Ernie, Uncle Ernie.
Okay, which was made in 1926 to illustrate A.A. Milne's classic adventures and stories of Winnie the Pooh and Christopher Robin. It's an imaginary world, but it's based on a real world. It's based on part of Ashdown Forest, near where A.A. Milne lived. And so we've got a situation where we've got an imaginary story that uses a real location, but what it does is gives a real sense of place. So it embeds the stories in this landscape. The heffalumps, the woozles, the bee tree, Piglet's house, owl, all of the characters live in this place, and it brings, imagination to life. I love this. I love the north arrow. It's not northeast, southwest, it's P-O-O-H, perfect. It's also planimetric. We can see that from the river because it looks down from above, directly from above. But yet all of the illustrations, a bit like the Aztec map from earlier, are on the side. They're in aspect. So they act as little illustrations of what goes on, little scenes or dioramas in their own way.
Because the 3D makes it more understandable.
I've got to get a 3D comment in there, haven't you?
One or
You
two.
have to.
One or two.
So this map, it was on my daughter's bedroom wall when she was a kid.
Yeah.
It's probably on many other people's bedroom walls as well. It's a beautiful map.
Yeah, I love that it's got the two North Pole in the top right corner. It kind of implies that it is part of the real world and it connects off to the rest of the world.
It's just a really pleasing looking map for sure.
Yeah, well, speaking of pleasing, let's do some more 3D. I think that's where we're at.
Pleasing for you.
Pleasing for most of the world. Let's just go with that. So this is Rhodes, Greece by Conrad Grunenberg, part of a travelogue he did, description of the voyage from Constance to Jerusalem. So he, in his early 70s, he went on a big trip to the Holy Land, and along the way he went to all of these amazing places and he drew them as he went. And for hundreds of years, if someone said, what is a 3D city map? They would say something like this, drawn planimetrically, where it's all about the feel of the place. It's drawing buildings so they're recognizable and identifiable, and their relative placement is more important. The roads between them doesn't have to get every road, get the major roads. This one's to the left and to the right of the different properties, and scale is less important. And it's just, gives you a really good feeling of what it was like here.
Really recognizable building, so you can tell it's an effort to have the characteristics of some of those buildings pulled out in this map.
The way we see a lot of cities built,
Right.
in terms of cartography, And it's interesting because ordinarily you'd be trained or taught, remove as much as possible from a map, get rid of it, omit, omit, omit. This actually does the reverse and probably puts more into it than really exists. So the detail adds the clarity and the legibility rather than the opposite, which would be more normal.
Absolutely.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, there's little windmills on the front wall there, and they were still there. And the actual whole travelogue is amazing. It's got all these extra places that he went to, Dubrovnik and Crete and Cyprus and Jerusalem. And he had this really interesting item in his prologue where he talked about, a human can scarcely enjoy the beauty and wonderment and not want to share it with others when they come back. So he really captured the joy of the trip and the sights that he saw and draw them in this really interesting and intriguing way, and then shared it when he came back.
So it's really a journey map as well.
Right, exactly.
Well, talking about some weird scale, let's get to our final map, which is this beautiful map called Islandia. This is a really detailed map of Iceland. It's attributed generally to Abraham Ortelius, a Dutch cartographer. But really, there's so much detail in the center of Iceland for the first time, which really made us researchers feel that it was probably, in fact, made by a geographer. There is so much going on in this map if we talk about the maximalist approach to mapping in this era. The obvious part of this map that just jumps right out at you is the sea creatures that are around the island. The stokel, which is thought to be a type of dolphin, and the description for that says it stood on its tail all day long.
They're very fit dolphins.
Yeah, and up at the top there we see the narwhal, and it included the ominous warning that if anyone eats of this fish, he will die immediately. So you want to stay away from the narwhal. Up in that top right corner, we see a whole bunch of really kind of cute polar bears playing on the ice floes. Below them is absolutely enormous pieces of driftwood, which seems totally out of place until you realize there's no trees that really grow on Iceland. So anytime driftwood came passing by from the Siberian forest, that's some serious commodity. By far my favorite part of this map is tiny detail though. Off on the right side, there is a little string of foxes that have chained themselves snout to tail down a super steep cliff to try to get to the eggs in a seabird nest. I just love that there are details like this to find in a map.
Yeah, I've been to Iceland, and it's just an incredible place. It's sort of got the volcanoes and the lava, and then you can see the moss growing, and then bushes, and sort of you can sort of see life developing on an island while you're there, all in the same place. And it needs a map like this, I think, to properly explain it.
Yeah, this is such a fun map. That's all the time we have.
Oh, wait, before you do that, there's a big week ahead at the user conference, but there's also the small match of a little football tournament going on the side. So good luck in the semi-finals, England versus Argentina, right?
Excellent, excellent. And New Zealand versus Portugal.
Oh.
Terrible predictions.
Okay, we are really out of time for us. We're going to send it over to our friends John and Lisa, who are going to talk about some of the maps in this year's map gallery.
Thanks, guys. Now I'm excited to welcome the one and only John Nelson, joining us from his infamous workshed in Michigan.
Thank you, Lisa. Always nice to join you, my co-conspirator, even if it is just beamed to you via these pixels on a screen.
And speaking of pixels, we're excited to show you some of the digital maps from this year's map gallery. But did you know that the maps in the map gallery utilize a lot of the same themes we saw in those historical maps?
There's loads of beautiful maps in the map gallery this year. It's hard to pick just a few to nerd out on. I don't know about you, Lisa, but it was really hard to just find some nuggets. But when I think about the maps that Ken, Edie, and Nathan showed us, I'm really drawn to the theme of revealing a charming sense of place, particularly those bird's eye perspective maps. The one of roads that Nathan showed us and that cool, charming Icelandic map that Edie described. I did find maps that carry that sort of energy, but they each do it in a different sort of way. This is a bird's eye view of the Yosemite area. It represents an angled perspective of a place, a bird's eye view, in a true 3D sense. So nearer features are larger and then far away things are smaller, just like they are in real life. So it's not to scale, which is to say you can't use like a single scale factor for the whole map. It varies. Here's another one, a lovely bird's eye map, which at first you'd probably think is 3D, but it's actually sort of 2D and 3D at once. It's called a plan oblique perspective. Plan oblique gives us a vertical sense of elevation, where elevation is kind of smeared upward, but the scale is maintained over the full map. So nearby things and faraway things are the same scale. That's impossible in real life, but possible with maps. These maps have a fascinating sense of place delivered by various bird's eye techniques. But a sense of place can be much more than just the physical surface of a place. It can be applied to the adventures that happen there too, like journeys and stories. So with that in mind, Lisa and I both loved this next map that does just that. Lines of life, jam-packed with story and adventure. One thing I liked about it was, like the 100-acre wood map that Ken showed and the Aztec travel map, it's loaded with story. It just goes about it in a really different way than those other maps, which I appreciate because, Lisa, there's no one right way to make a map.
That is so true, John. And one of the things I really like about this map are the things that it does differently. For example, if you look at the legend at the top left, this is not your standard legend, yet it is so easy to understand. It's so clear to the user. They actually use pictorial elements to show us what the animals actually look like. And it's the words underneath that match the colors on the map, giving us this really interesting sense of a legend, and yet it's very easy to understand, and we get to know what those animals actually look like. And like the Jon Snow map that Ken showed, where he described it as points on a map, this is lines on a map. And yet there are a lot of lines on this map. What I appreciate that the map author did was that he allowed you as the map reader to use your brain and your eyes to create that generalized pattern to reveal the pattern like the Jon Snow map. And if you zoom in, that's where you get to see all those individual lines, and you can see how the animals traversed through time, like you said, like a journey, like a story. I just really appreciate the choices made by this map author. It's just so vibrant and beautiful and easy to understand. Now I want to show you two more of my favorite maps that utilize those historical techniques in modern GIS. This map is a schematic diagram made by the Army Corps of Engineers to show a hydrologic network. And yet it looks like a transit map. One of the things I love is that it distorts the scale, kind of like we've seen in some of these other maps, but it does that so that you can very clearly see the different nodes along the network. I think this is an ode to the 100-acre wood map, the Icelandic map, and even the Rhodes map. It just does these things so well. And finally, I really love this map because it shows a lot of data in one single graphic. I think this is an ode to Napoleon's March, which was very good at showing us multiple data attributes, time and distance, and it was a big story. And this one does so in a very interesting way. On the bottom right, you can see there are 3 distinct maps telling us different stories from different data sets and different attributes. And yet in the middle, you can see they combine those into 2 separate maps, one from above and one at an angle, so that you as the map reader get a chance to digest the information and really understand it in a way that tells you the whole story. And so I really appreciate what it does here using 3D and transparency to tell an interesting narrative about lots of data. And these were just a few examples of our favorite maps from this year's map gallery.
And it was a shame, Lisa, just to pick out a few of these. We had a hard time, but you don't have to pick out just a few to nerd out on. You can check out all of them in the virtual gallery.
Thank you, John, for joining us for this year's Mappy Hour. You can browse all of these incredible works right now by heading over to the virtual map gallery. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next year.